At this time, I'll call our meeting to order. I would like to ask our chaplain, Grilly Mitchell, if he would come and lead us in our invocation, which will be followed by our Pledge of Allegiance. If you will, all please rise.
Let us bow our head. Oh, merciful God and our Heavenly Father, we are so grateful and thankful for this day. We ask you to be with us, bless us as we go about the duties and responsibilities of the town's business. Grant us the knowledge and the wisdom and understanding that we make wise and smart decisions that's beneficial for the entire town. We thank you for health. We thank you for peace. We thank you for love. In your holy name we pray. Amen.
Amen. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
You may be seated. At this time, do I have a motion to approve our agenda that is before you?
Madam Mayor,
Yes, sir.
I'd like to make a motion to remove item B from our agenda.
Okay, I have a motion to remove item B. Do I have a second?
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Is there any other changes to the agenda? If not, do I have a motion to approve the agenda with the change?
Motion to approve.
Motion.
Have a motion to approve. Do I have a second?
Second.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by raising your right hand. Seeing none opposed. Thank you. At this time, we will have a discussion and presentation concerning the former Episcopal Parish House from the, and Jeff Adolphson, who was the Senior Restoration Specialist, could not be with us today. He is with the North Carolina Department of Natural and Cultural Resources. He had a conflict with this time. So we have with us today Kathleen Turner, and she is the Regional Director for Preservation North Carolina. And I'm going to ask her if she would mind coming to that microphone and giving us something as far as what we could expect from the Historic Preservation Office. And Kathleen has been with us and has toured both facilities, the church and the parish house. So welcome.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the invitation to come to Hope Mills. I haven't had a chance in recent years to be here, so thank you again. I recently became aware of the community's discussion and focus on the condition issues and whether or not there was a future use for the parish house. In talking to your town manager, Melissa Adams, we just started throwing around some ideas, and as she was giving me an update on the issues that were the topic of discussion concerning this building. And so I don't like to talk about things I don't know anything about. So she did invite me to come down here and see the building. And I did have a chance to briefly review some of the reports about it. I am also aware of the town's recent decision to demolish the building and had been reached out to concerning, is there an alternative to demolition? And indeed, that's what Preservation North Carolina is about. We're the state's only statewide nonprofit whose mission is to save places that are important to the diverse people of North Carolina. And I can't answer the question for you whether this building is worth saving. Can it be saved? Of course. This building can be rehabilitated. The questions are, what resources are available? Are you willing to avail yourself of those resources to do it, and so forth? I can't answer the question on behalf of the community whether it's worth saving. That's a question that the community answers. The people I've talked to, of course, would like to see it saved, and so here I am speaking with you. And in fact, I didn't really have an official or formal presentation to give. It was more in the spirit of coming up with potential solutions as an alternative to demolition. I understand when a smaller community has high priorities and when faced with substantial costs for the rehabilitation of a structure, that you have to look at those priorities and make your decision measured by that. If there are solutions that meet the objectives and vision of the broader community, that's what we're here to help you explore and to see if the community wants to pursue those. And so I'm here to almost maybe even facilitate that community discussion. Concerning the role that Preservation North Carolina could take, in the event that the community decides to preserve this building and move forward with solution building, there is a state statute that allows local governments to enter into negotiated sales with preservation-related nonprofits of government-owned historic buildings. So you don't have to go into an open bid process necessarily. You can ensure that there's some certainty to the fate of a historic building. So we can certainly be in that position for you in the event that you decide that maybe conveying this building to an entity that can proceed with preserving it is a solution. Great. And then there were a couple of other ideas we tossed around, and that just depends on, what the town would like to do with that piece of property. I understand there was an interest in maintaining ownership of the property, and in the event that that happened, how could that building be preserved if we, the town, want to continue to use or to own that property, but we don't want to dedicate town resources necessarily to that extent toward the rehabilitation, maybe a long-term lease to an entity that will do the fundraising and gather up the resources and restore the building. So meeting both objectives. So there are, if we're willing to think outside the box, there might be some solutions that meet your objectives. We're here to assist you with that if you want to do that. So, I do have information available to you on the state statute that allows local governments to work with Preservation North Carolina on disposing of surplus town-owned historic properties, so that in the event you don't apply it for this building, there might be another town-owned historic property that you would like to have some certainty about. I can make sure and get that to you. And I have other information about Preservation North Carolina. I was also asked to bring some fundraising ideas, and I do have a list of potential funding sources in the event, of course, you wish to pursue that and explore it further before making any final decisions. So, and I'm open to any questions.
Do we have questions?
Madam Mayor,
Yes, sir.
Kathleen, thank you for coming and taking the time
You're most
to
welcome.
tour the building.
My pleasure.
I'm sure you'll agree that demolition of any historic building should definitely be the last resort. And that's pretty much why you're here, is to share alternatives of saving it, solution building of saving an historical structure such as the Parish House. And I truly appreciate you coming and sharing any ideas that you have with the community to save it. As you said, any building can be saved. I'm from Virginia, and I've seen a lot worse buildings than that house, and I've seen it saved, and I've seen it saved through community effort. And that's where we are with this project. This isn't just a one person, it's a community project. And it represents the Mill Village and the culture of this town that was established in 1891. And I am sure, without any question, that the pictures of former mayors on that wall that you see behind you would want us to explore every option available before demolition of that building. And that's all I have to say, Mayor. Thank you.
Any other comments? Yes, ma'am.
I'm
Go
sorry.
ahead.
Oh, I just wanted to piggyback onto that. In preparation for visiting Hope Mills, I wanted to look at your history a little bit more, and there is a National Register nomination for the downtown area and the parish house, and of course the adjacent church are contributing structures in that National Register Historic District. I also noted that there have been in recent years quite a few losses of contributing structures in that National Register District, and so I know how difficult it will be to lose yet another structure or beyond that even more. To that point, there are tax credits available to help provide an incentive to preserving these buildings. Of course, the tax credits are available to entities or private owners who have North Carolina income tax liabilities and federal income tax liabilities in the case of an income-producing property, but tax credits are available. So there's that. And if it doesn't apply to this building, please know it applies to other historic buildings in your community.
So our Trade Street Business District would be an area that could be applying for these funds also, the actual owners of those buildings.
That's correct. If they're a contributing structure in the National Register Historic District, then yes, they're eligible for tax credits for qualifying rehabilitation work.
That's key. That's a good point to know. Thanks for sharing that.
Madam Mayor, may I?
Yes, sir.
I too would love to explore all avenues to save this building. I was into construction for over 40 years, and I saw some disturbing stuff in that building today. But I, like Mr. Bellflowers, I believe it can be saved if we can do it without spending a lot of town funds through fundraisers or grants or something like that. But we have to do something quick to stabilize the building. And I don't know how much money towards something like that it may be available that we could apply for, or how long it would take us to get it. But that building is not heated or air conditioner in it, and it will deteriorate fast because it needs some work to protect it from Mother Nature. So I too would like to explore all those avenues. If we have a timetable, maybe, do you have anything as far as a timetable that we may get funding?
First, I'd like to add to what you just said. I think the town should be commended for expending funds on what you have in terms of bringing a structural engineer in to assess the building. That was an excellent step that was taken. Of course, there was a building inspections report back in 2013, which was the first step, I think. So you've got these excellent tools, and then Lysick and Associates also took the extra step to provide you phased scope, recommended scope of work, as well as some a budget and cost estimates tied into that. So you've got the tools already, really, to proceed with some fundraising, approaching funding sources such as private foundations and so forth. North Carolina Community Foundation. I think Cumberland County benefits from the Cumberland County Community Foundation, an excellent foundation. So look close to home as well as more broadly, and I did bring some information for you. Second to that, and more directly to your point, Commissioner Legg, would be what is the vision or proposed use of the building, and that will drive what sources of what sources of funds you anticipate going after, and really also drive your cost estimate as well. Some uses are more intensive in terms of what you've got to put into the building than others, obviously, and so that'll have something to do with your funding sources and your budget, as well as how you phase the project. that is dependent on your community conversation and any results. There are also funds out there to bring in consultants to facilitate that community conversation in determining what are the needs in the community, what use can you put that building to. You're putting in an impressive investment in the rehabilitation of the adjacent church. It's an exquisite building and near the center of town. It's a great location. I don't know what is going to become of that vacant lot next door, but it's good to have that piece of property adjacent to that. If the parish hall is, if I can, stick my neck out, maybe, just sort of take a stab at a suggestion, the parish hall adjacent to that and having that small yard in between, could continue to have a use consistent with its past use, which is connected to whatever events are going on in that church. And if the recommendations by Lysa and Associates are pursued, then you could continue having that large open space within that structure in order to have indoor functions, and then some landscaping in between the buildings to tie them both together, to piggyback onto the uses of one another. So again, depending on the direction the community goes in terms of proposed use, that'll drive your fundraising. And of course, it's up to you to determine what a reasonable amount of time is in order to reach certain benchmarks in a phased approach of a rehabilitation. What makes sense to your community and those of you making decisions. So.
Any other questions or comments? Any other?
Madam Mayor,
Yes, sir.
Kathleen.
Commissioner Belfly.
when we were looking at the Heritage Park Plan, the master plan that's being conducted now, the prior board in May wanted all three of those properties included for consideration in the Heritage Park master plan.
3 properties, the third being the corner
parking
lot that, okay.
Yes, the parking
Sure.
lot, the church, and the parish house. That was the vision of the prior board back in May, to include all three into what you're just talking about from a consultant's perspective. And I think that would definitely give us some benchmarks on what to do with all three different properties and how to tie them together. Especially the last piece where that parking lot is a proposed lot there. And connect all three of those along with downtown Trade Street as a connector to the Heritage Park master plan that we're doing now.
Well, again, it sounds like you have all the pieces put together in terms of a vision for that area, small area plan, if you will. And just having visited that particular location, that corner lot is some nice landscaped off-street parking wouldn't be a bad idea. But again, it comes back to proposed uses. Will that make sense as a piece of that larger puzzle? And the flip side, if we go five years from now and that building is gone and you've got that nice church building sitting by itself, sort of in a sea of potential parking, that think about those things too, of what is that small area going to look like in the future, and it as a key piece to your downtown area and a focal point, and an investment, on the part of community resources, but also for the greater use of the community and the next generations to follow. So thinking about those as you proceed, I think might be useful and important.
Thank you.
Mayor.
Yes, sir.
We have talked about using that building as a museum at one time. We have another building over there for that use now. But that could still be a valuable asset to the town, being it historical the way it is. have you seen buildings, I'm gonna put you on the spot.
Mhm.
Have you seen buildings
It's my
that
job,
are
put me
in
on the
this
spot.
condition that have been saved or worse?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. I have, I've brought an issue of our magazine a couple of issues ago, the focus of which was before and afters. And again, you know, I don't take structural engineers' reports lightly. They are the experts, and there's a lot going on with the building, but yes, I've seen much worse, and then they become, you know, focal points and a celebration point in the community. You know, just joking around a little with some of our developer friends, sometimes all they need are 3 walls in order to make a project work, kind of thing. It all comes down to budget, you know, so, and do you have a designated purpose for the building? And if the answer to both of those are yes, then most certainly proceed, especially if you've got a lot of community support to try to achieve that. And again, Commissioner Legg is absolutely right. You know, sealing up that area around that smoke stack, that chimney stack where, you know, some of the water penetration has been, will buy you some time while you consider your options and the building not get too much worse. There's a little bit of patching you could do in order, again, to buy yourself some time to really figure this out. Do we want to put the museum there? That's a great idea. It's near the center of town. It's walkable to a lot of the historic properties within your downtown area and that are contributing structures in the historic district. Makes a lot of sense. It could have wonderfully convenient, compatible use to the adjacent church, which is being rehabilitated and preserved for community gathering place of programs, maybe even events that the community can participate in. So it makes a lot of sense. And a structure like that has a large open space, potential kitchen area that it had historically really, is a very flexible opportunity. It gives you multiple uses. So
I think we saw, I'm sorry.
Go. Kathleen, and to piggyback on
Commissioner
what you were saying.
Bellflowers, could we wait and
Oh, sorry.
see if someone else wants to speak?
I saw a lot of stuff in there today that, in my opinion, should be stored somewhere. There's a piano, there's record books in there, some minutes from their meetings from years past. There's a lot of valuable stuff for the museum that's in that building. So I don't know if it's torn down, we may want to look at getting some of that stuff and storing it somewhere and possibly using it in the museum. Or if the building's rebuilt or reconstructed, it could go right back in that building depending on the use of it. I don't want to see us to have to raise tax dollars in order to fund repairing that building. But if there's a way we can repair it without going that route, I would love to see it happen.
Okay, anyone that hasn't spoken want to speak? Haven't had any of the other board members, any comments or questions for Ms. Turner?
I got a question.
Okay, Commissioner Marley.
Excuse me, the process. Explain the process of going through, if you go through this preservation in North Carolina, explain that process. What happens?
if you choose to sell the property through a negotiated sale through the state statute I was speaking of.
So you say sell the property.
So
So essentially, if we go through that process, we're selling that property. We're losing control of the building. We're losing the property that it sits on, and you're basically selling the building, correct?
that's one choice. You don't have to do it that way. But I was just pointing out the state statute that allows a local government to enter into a negotiated sale where a beloved historic publicly owned building is concerned. And in that case, Preservation North Carolina has assisted local governments in marketing and selling a historic publicly owned property subject to protective covenants and a rehabilitation agreement in order to ensure that it is preserved and taken care of into the future and not just left to chance. And in those cases, those are sold. It was relayed to me that there was an interest in retaining ownership of that property. And so I just thought, well, if you're open to preserving the building, but the community has limited tax dollars to devote to that, maybe you could consider entering into a long-term lease with a nonprofit or other entity to do the fundraising and the restoring, and you retain ownership of it, but you enter into a lease agreement that is mutually beneficial to both parties, certainly a longer-term lease. I think as far as tax credits are concerned, the IRS, I think, establishes, and you'd have to look this up, or the town attorney look this up, but you can enter into a long-term lease with a private entity or individual for the period of depreciation, I think 39 years for commercial, 27 and a half for residential. I think I have those numbers right. And whoever gets that long-term lease can avail themselves of tax credits. So you could actually see some private investment in the building. Now, mind you, the benefit of conveying the parcel is you get it back onto the tax rolls, and you incentivize private investment into a building that otherwise was just sitting there, and maybe a blight on the community, bleeding the town books, that kind of thing. And so that's certainly a benefit that some local governments have decided to pursue. But in the case where you want to retain ownership, you can look into alternatives that are mutually beneficial, potentially.
So you get into the first part of that you were saying, I kept hearing the word sale, negotiate a sale.
Mhm.
Then you talked about leasing the building or doing a mutual leasing agreement. Well, if
Two
you
different
lease
things.
that-
Two different things, yeah.
If you lease the building out, you still don't have no control over the building. So who's going, I know you say they're going to pay for the repairs and they have all these tax incentives and everything, but you still have no control
Right.
over that.
You have
building.
control over the lease agreement, and that's that's just a negotiation and putting it together to ensure that, again, it's mutually beneficial between the parties entering into it.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Okay, Commissioner Bellflowers, did you have one more comment?
Kathleen, actually, you may have answered the comment I was going to make, because I was going to come back behind and say, yes, if both questions are yes, would your office be willing to assist in the rehabilitation of the building, and what options would be available for that rehabilitation? And I think you have answered both of those directly to Commissioner Marley's question about the process.
Right. We can assist with the process.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, we're not a granting organization. I wish we had the resources to provide grants and loans to facilitate the restoration of these buildings. Maybe someday we'll get there, but we can certainly advise and partner. And Commissioner Marley, I do have a brochure also for all of you on the state statute, so you're not, so it's not guesswork. And I think I may have emailed this to Ms. Adams as well, so you can look at it.
Just
And
make
it
sure,
might not pertain
just
to
make
you.
sure the clerk's got one.
Sir.
Make sure our clerk has one.
Yeah. I
Yeah,
will.
and I think I've got a couple of the emails too with information, yeah.
It might be useful for another topic.
Thank you.
It's an electronic format, too. And then here's some information on basically what Preservation North Carolina can do. I don't know if I have enough copies to go around. Again, I have it in electronic format for all of you.
We have it.
You do?
Yeah, we've,
Oh, okay, oh, good.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
All right. I was on the ball then. If Jeff Adelson was here, he's the restoration specialist with the State Historic Preservation Office. That's a state agency separate from Preservation North Carolina. We're a statewide nonprofit, but we overlap quite a bit. They wanted you all also to know that they're getting ready to start the Congressional Historic Preservation Fund Special Hurricane Appropriation Subgrant Program. So if you have any public buildings that were affected by the hurricanes, sources of funding will be made available. They don't have the details quite yet. But if this building was damaged at all by the hurricane, it may be eligible for some of those funds as well.
Okay.
good to know.
Any other?
If there's anything else, I'm right here, so I can get up
Thank you.
again and answer something if another
Thank you.
question comes.
Any other questions for Ms. Turner? Anything? Okay. Let me see.
Want to talk about the offer? Because we pulled it from closed session.
That's the reason why I asked for it to be removed, because I wasn't interested in entertaining an offer. That property is not for sale, it has been listed for sale, and the board has not come to a conclusion that we wanted to sell that property.
But I think we still have to consider it. Am I correct, Dan? An offer was made on property.
You're under no legal obligation to consider it, but, I mean, it's an offer that's been made to the board. If you want to discuss it, you can. If you don't want to entertain the offer, you've got no legal obligation to
Okay,
consider it or respond,
okay.
but it's the will of the board.
Well, I make a motion, we at least discuss the offer. It was presented, shared, at least discuss it.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second that motion. I'd
Yep.
like to discuss it myself.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by raising your right hand. All those opposed?
Passed.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
Since the board has elected to consider the offer, do y'all want to consider that in open session, or do you want to consider that in closed session? It's permissible to do it in closed session. It's also permissible to do it in open session. So again, will of the board.
I just have a question. And my question would be, would they be interested in moving the house? They can have the house, but I would like for us to keep the land. If we all vote to, have it demolished, if they wanna move the house, I would entertain that option for them to have the house.
We can ask them, I suppose.
I guess, Dan, to your first question, are we going to discuss it in open or closed? I mean, I have no issue discussing it in open.
Might as well, it's been on Facebook
It-
since it come out, so.
The whole offer was shared yesterday with the board, so.
I would prefer that we discuss it with the people of the town
I would too.
so they know what's going on. I don't want to do anything behind their backs.
Okay,
Good.
okay, so
Mayor,
do you want to advise Mr. Hartzog what you want, how we want to discuss this? You want to take the lead, or you want us to just look at what's before us?
Well, y'all have a copy of the offer. If there's any questions, I believe Rod is here. Rod was involved in the offer. If you want to answer questions, I don't know if you're willing to discuss, but do y'all have any questions?
I have a question for you, Mayor.
Okay.
I know it's in this paperwork here, but I haven't read it all yet. Does the offer exceed what we've already spent for engineering and everything on that building?
No, it equals it minus the, insurance proceeds.
I will say this, the statutes that allow private sale to a nonprofit for preservation purposes, I believe, require us to do that for fair market value, unless we are permitted by statute to make appropriations to that nonprofit board, which I'm not sure what the authority would be to make appropriations to that board. So I believe that the sale could only be a private sale if it's for fair market value, which I don't know what the fair market value of the property is.
Do we know what the fair market value is? Is there a way of,
Mayor, what was the tax value of the building? Did Cumberland County have it listed?
it's not on, I don't think it's on the tax records because did you want him to answer the question if they would be interested in
I
moving
believe
it?
we had the Episcopal Church appraised.
Church
I
appraised.
don't know that we've had an appraisal done of the parish house.
It would have
Okay.
to be appraised separately.
Okay. The question that Dr. McCray or Mayor Pro Tem requested was, would you be interested in moving the house? I guess Mr. McLean would be the one that would be, if you could come and respond to any questions that they may have, representing the Hope Mills Historical Society. The question from Dr. McCray.
In reference to the question from the Mayor Pro Tem, no, ma'am, at this time, I unfortunately, without having a meeting of the Historic Society board, but I would say that at this present time, we will probably be unable to just take the building and be able to move it anywhere else at this present time.
Any other questions for Mr. McLean?
I-
Yes, ma'am.
I'd like to ask a question. It doesn't really, just to clear in my own mind how things are going about. 4 years ago, we went through and we had it appraised and everything, and we decided, that board had decided to go ahead and demolish it. And then the last board that came on, they rescinded our motion and decided not to. Okay, that board was in existence for 2 years. Why they didn't do something when they had the majority of the vote? For 2 years, they didn't do something until now.
Commissioner Edwards, I'm speaking to you at the moment as the president of the Historical Society.
That's good.
I have never been, nor will I ever probably be, a member of the commission of the Board of Commissioners. I cannot answer questions that previous boards may or may not have brought up. That is not in my purview to answer. That's a theoretical, hypothetical question that I cannot answer for you.
Well, that's one I've been thinking about for a long time. I just couldn't understand when they had the majority vote for 2 years that they didn't do anything before. But I appreciate your answer.
Are there any other questions I can answer for you, madam?
Any other
No, I'm through.
questions? Yes,
Yes.
Commissioner Legg?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Does your group have any plans for a fundraiser to help save that building? And if so, what might that be?
Commissioner Legg, in all consideration, yes, we have got some ideas, plans specifically laid out. No, not at this particular point in time. But as our application for intent put out, we were asking for closing in 90 days. Within 90 days, yes, we would have a plan. as of this particular moment, no, we do not have a specific plan. But yes, we believe we can make it work.
Madam Mayor, I have some questions.
Yes, Commissioner Bellflowers.
I'm going to go to Exhibit A of your offer letter. And I see that all the cost pertaining to the parish house since 2015, including 50% of the scheduled demolition next week, is included in your offer. And that's full reimbursement to the town for every taxpayer dollar that was spent on the parish house,
To the best of my knowledge, that is correct, yes.
minus a revenue check for $17,690.91, which brings that total down to $226.57. What's key about this is that back in 2016, Cypress Construction charged the town $6,530 to perform the exact engineering study that Lysick performed for us last year at about $7,100. 2 engineering studies have been done on the parish house. 2 of them. One in 16. At that time, Cypress Construction estimated $228,000 to rehabilitate that building. This was in 16. This is 4 years ago. And here we are in 2020, and nothing's been done with the building, and now it's over $300,000. What's different between 16 and where we are now is that we have a newly formed nonprofit organization such as what you're talking about that made this offer to step up and save this building. That's what's different. Is that now the Hope Mills Historic Society nonprofit is willing to take the lead on saving this building. Much like another sale that occurred in May of 2017 between the VFW and the purchase of the Sunshine Center. Same deal. I know because I was part of it and I wrote the offer and I can speak about it. That the town, that VFW Post reimbursed the town of Hope Mills for every dollar that was spent on the Sunshine Center. That was donated to the town at no cost. The parish house, along with the church and the property, all were donated to the town at no cost. None. So I'm not really sure where this fair market value comes into play when they were donated at no cost. But back to the VFW, at that point in time, several members of this board that are currently on this board now approved that sale. So I don't think you guys are doing anything that hasn't been done before by another nonprofit who cared about a building, who wanted to save that building, preserve that building, and use it as a community function, which it ritually does every month in our community. And this parish house has the same potential to tie it to the church, to the property, to the historic village, to the historic district, to Heritage Park for future years of historical value. And I say that because since the VFW purchased the Sunshine Center, they had to put money into it. Don't think they didn't. They did. But they knew that going in. And I think you guys know that going into this. So the question about whether the house can be moved, no. I don't believe the house can be moved, for one thing. And then why would you want to move a house that's connected to the historical district? It hooks up with the church. Why would you even want to move it? It's either all or it's none. But that's the package. So you're asking for 90 days for closing for this offer.
Yes, sir.
Okay, and that's to raise how much money? Oh, that's to raise the rest of this money, the 24,000, or is that the whole thing?
No, sorry, excuse me. No, that would be to ensure that we have got the money to close the offer.
Okay,
Then also to put into place and to start the fundraising for the refurbishment.
okay. And I also noticed in this offer letter somewhere in here that your organization's willing to pay for all the closing costs as well for the transfer.
It's in the offer, sir.
Yeah. And it's the same thing we did with the VFW when we purchased the Sunshine Center. Yeah. Okay, thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to go over that list. I mean, it's well detailed too, by the way. It's real thorough. Thank you, Mayor.
You're welcome.
Mayor,
Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. Who would?
I just basically had a statement.
Okay.
Not really a question, but a statement, and just so everybody knows how I stand. I was on the board that voted to sell the property to the VFW, and everybody in this room knows that that was a totally different situation and totally different circumstances than what we're talking about in here today. So, with saying that, I am still not in favor of entertaining this offer. The property is not for sale. We have not offered it, advertised it as being for sale, but I will say this much, that I agree with Mayor Pro Tem that I would sell the building but retain the property. So if they're not willing to move it off of that property, then we're at it, in my opinion, we're at an impasse. And like Commissioner Bellflower said, it's all or nothing. So
Yeah.
in my opinion, it's nothing at this point.
Madam Mayor, if I
Yes,
may
sir.
refer to movement of the building. Commissioner Marley, you are well aware of the LISIC investigation and report. You are also very well aware, due to the neglect of the town of Hope Mills, failing to do any maintenance to that building since the time that it was received, the building is now in the condition it is. That is not the fault of the citizens. That's not the fault of the Historical Society. That is the fault of the town of Hope Mills. Because that building has now been put in the position that it is, it cannot physically be moved. That is the result of the lack of maintenance and the negligence on the part of the town of Hope Mills. And as you said, sir, you were one of the members on the board at that time.
And I didn't want to spend no money on it then, and I still don't want to spend no money on it now.
If you have no further questions for me, ma'am.
Any other questions?
Mayor
for-
Warner?
Yes, ma'am.
I appreciate what you're saying and everything, but I would like to make it clear that by the parish house not being maintained or worked on was not the town of the Hope Mills. It was the property. They were not given any instructions to carry on because we told them to hold up on it. The town itself and the staff, they did what they were told to do. And unless they had guidance and direction of where to go, it's not the town's fault. And
Commissioner
then, too,
Edwards.
I would like to reiterate that what Commissioner Bellflower said about the sale of the property, the Sunshine House, as a sore subject to me, even though I did vote for it, for them to take over. It's a long story behind it and has no comparison to this whatsoever.
Commissioner Edwards, I understand what you said. That's why I was very careful to say the town of Hope Mills. I did not refer to the staff or to the public works directors or any other individuals. The town of Hope Mills, as is represented by the Board of Commissioners. That is the town, madam. I was not pointing fingers at any individual staff members.
Okay.
Madam Mayor,
Appreciate that.
Madam Mayor, if you are
Yes, sir.
no further questions.
Okay.
Madam Mayor, I'm gonna make a motion that we accept the letter of intent to purchase real property for historic preservation from the Hope Mills Historical Society. That is my motion, Mayor.
Point of order on that. Nowhere in
Yes.
this agenda does it say or discuss any action being taken at this meeting today. The only thing it says is discussion.
That's
Says
not
no
what the attorney said. We could take action with this offer. I asked about it earlier.
I think if you've got a properly noticed special meeting where discussion of a particular item is advertised to the public, that it would be discussed, I think you have the legal authority to take action with regard to that pursuant to.
That plus it was also shared with the board, which is uncharacteristic in prior offers. So yes, that's my motion, Mayor.
I will add too that to the extent the board wanted to sell the property to a nonprofit for preservation purposes, it would have to be done with a preservation covenant and restriction. So we couldn't just accept the offer as is. We would have to add a covenant for preservation and restrictions on the property. That's pursuant to 160A-400.8.
I will amend my motion
Would
to
there-
include that, Mayor.
Would there not also have to be some, something in there that the property would revert back to the town? Because I think in any agreement that, such as this, the way it's written, if for some reason they don't raise the money, some reason they don't preserve the property, that piece of property should revert back to the town. Is there not something that can be put in that? The way this is written, I believe this is not in the town's best interest.
Well, I think you could include that with the restrictions, that it be used for that, and then have it sort of a reverter clause that if it's not used for those purposes, it would revert back to the town.
And
So
what
you
about a
could
time
include
frame on this being completed? Is that something, because I think that's the other concern that we have, and I think the most recent concern has been with the fire marshal and the potential for fire because of the building itself, and having seen what occurred, on Main Street already with an old building. So my concern is there going to be a time frame that could be included? How much time do you allow?
I don't know that there's any specific requirement on time frame, but the town could, that would be subject to negotiation. And I misspoke, by the way, it's 168-279 is the statutory authority, or the statutory requirement that we include those covenants. But again, I think regardless of what the town paid for the property, the statutory authority to sell property below fair market value we only have the statutory to do that if we have the authority to appropriate funds to that organization in the first place, which I'm not sure that we do have authority to appropriate funds to the proposed buyer, which means that you can't give away town property, and essentially selling for less than fair market value is in essence giving away. It's a gift, and you can't make a gift to an organization unless you have the authority to appropriate funds. So I think it would have to be for fair market value, unless there's some statutory authority to appropriate funds to that organization that I'm not aware of.
But Dan, that didn't occur with the VFW sale of the Sunshine Center.
I wasn't involved in that sale. I'm not sure what the.
I
terms
think
were.
that was fair market value. I think we actually had fair market value for that structure, if I'm not
That was
mistaken.
straight reimbursement, Mayor.
But it was still considered fair market value.
$50,000 was fair market value
That's
for the
what we were
Sunshine Center.
told. Yes, sir. And that's not, we're off topic now. We should be on the topic we're currently on. You have a motion on the floor.
I do have a motion.
And that motion, if you'll go back over, because you had made some changes to it.
There's specific statute. Yeah, and there is specific statutory authority to donate to veterans groups. So that there would be authority to sell less than fair market value.
To veterans.
Okay.
Can you repeat your motion?
Motion is to accept the letter of intent option to purchase real property for historic preservation from the Hope Mills Historic Society in accordance with preserving, and I don't remember what the statute is, Dan, but if you could tell me, I'll read that into the motion?
It would be 160A,
160A,
hang on one second. 168-266 authorizes the sale of historic property to preservation.
-266, and to enter negotiations with the reverter clause on the property as well, and timeline for completion of rehabilitation.
And are we included in that it would have to have the fair market value? Because we can't give away town property if it's worth more than this amount. Is that what you stated?
Unless there's some specific statutory authorization to appropriate funds
Okay.
to that organization, and I'm not aware of any right now.
Okay. Okay, so I have a motion on the floor. Do we have a second?
Madam Mayor, I'd like to ask Mr. Bellflowers a question, please.
Okay.
Wouldn't we rather give the historical committee time to raise money before we put this up for sale?
Well, that's part of the motion, is to entering the negotiations of the timeline for the rehabilitation of the structure.
With our historical committee?
No, this is Historical Society.
Historical Society,
It's the
nonprofit.
nonprofit group.
the nonprofit that made the initial offer to us.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? All those in favor of the acceptance of the letter of intent and preserving the property based on statute 168-266 with a reverter clause to be negotiated, all those in favor signify by raising your right hand. All those opposed? It's 3-2. So the property will not be sold. Any other comments at
Madam
this
Mayor.
time? Yes, sir.
Okay, would the board entertain a motion to at least consider the lease using one of options that was presented by Kathleen today? Would the board want to entertain a lease to the Hope Mills Historical Society in saving and rehabilitating the structure?
Any thoughts on that?
Does, Ms. Turner, does that give the town still ownership of the property? I'm sorry.
I would defer to your town attorney on this. I mean, I think negotiating a long-term lease, I think both interested parties put their cards on the table and negotiate terms that are mutually satisfactory. So, you know, if the preservation side wants to make sure that the building is protected beyond the extent of their restoration dollars that have gone into it, that's something to discuss. If you want an exit ramp in terms of a time frame, that's up for discussion and
Right.
negotiation. I mean, I think this gives both interested parties freedom to share your concerns, make sure everybody's interests are met, and make sure that everything is done legally in terms of what you're allowed to do as a town. And again, I think your town attorney will play a key part in that, and certainly the Preservation North Carolina will assist as we can.
Well, so that, my motion would be, would we consider negotiating a long-term lease with the Hope Mills Historical Society to preserve and rehabilitate the structure?
Okay, so we have a motion to enter into a long-term lease. Do we have a second to that motion?
I will second that motion.
We have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Okay, all those in favor signify by raising your right hand. All those opposed? 3-2. So we're not willing to lease it either. Is there any other discussion?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, sir.
I'd like to make a motion that we cancel the demolition of the parish house until we have time to try to work through some of the details of preserving it.
Okay, we have a motion to cancel or postpone the demolition of the parish house. Do we have a second?
Second?
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor of postponing signify by raising your right hand. All those opposed? It's 3-2. Okay, do we have any other comments? If not, do we
Madam
have a
Mayor,
motion to?
I do have a comment about, now that the decision has been made and next, well, the week of 27th, which is next week, begins the demolition, there's still some items that are left in that structure that needs to be moved.
I think my understanding was it was going to be, those items were going to be moved to the storage house. I guess, Ms. Adams, can you entertain that? I know we discussed, I think the piano was going to be moved back over to the church. Was that? I don't know, but I know that there was a conversation about the items needing to be moved to the storage house or to the church. Okay. Okay. Anything else, sir? Anything else? If not, do we have a motion to adjourn? Have a motion and a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Thank you for coming this afternoon.